In this Goulet Q&A, I talk about my ink collection, which pens that I would resurrect if I could bring something back, and what makes a nib sing! Hey gang, it's Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it is beginning of May already. What happened? May 13th, I believe. Friday the 13th. Hopefully that's not a bad thing. Hopefully everything runs smoothly on this Q&A, but I missed last week. I had planned to do last week's, ended up not doing it. Rachel and I had some family stuff that came up on Wednesday, which is when we normally record Q&A. And, you know, just had to take care of that. So family comes first. So I did that. As it so happened, we were almost done with the Dan Bishop interview. So we ended up publishing that on Friday instead. So we'd intended to keep regular Goulet Q&A going, and we're still going to plan on doing that, but it just happened to be that it replaced it for that Friday. So I hope you enjoyed that video though. So that's kind of cool, and we'll have more of those coming out. Those were videos that were recorded in Atlanta when I attended that a couple of weeks ago. So what else we had going on here? Had the general manager for Pilot Namiki come and visit. John Lane, shot an interview with him too, so we'll have that coming out in a few weeks. And showed us a whole bunch of gorgeous Namiki Mach-E pens. So getting to know those, learning a lot, appreciating them very much. They are beautiful. We're photographing them, going to do some video stuff. That's pretty exciting. So I'm really eager to get that going. And then we've had some product launches this week, specifically the Midori Traveler's Notebooks, which I emphasized Midori and should not have because they've actually changed their name to just Traveler's Company instead of Midori. So Midori is a brand that has a lot of other things that has nothing to do with Traveler's Notebook, and that's actually more their mainstay. So they actually like broke off the Traveler's Notebook, made it Traveler's Company, and now when you look at our site, you'll see Traveler's Company with the Traveler's Notebook. It now has nothing to do with Midori, even though that's what everybody's going to call it for the next like 5 years. It's now separated. So even you see, as I said it in this video, I'm still associating it. So sorry about that, confuse you there. But anyway, so that's, we've had the new camel color coming out, as well as the teeny tiny little limited edition, which I don't even know at this point if we still have them, but I expect them to sell out. So we're getting one shot on those limited editions. So they're pretty neat. And I was going to show it, and I left mine at home, so sorry about that. And then we have another pen that we're going to be coming out with pretty soon. I'm starting to talk about it now. We showed it on Periscope. It's on the website now. The Visconti, this is called the Manhattan, is the model. It came out in a resin, acrylic. This is, we are not going to have the resin one at GouletPens.com, but this is the Wall Street celluloid. So Manhattan pen, Wall Street celluloid. If you are familiar with like the old Parker Vacuumatics, it's a similar kind of celluloid looking thing to that, but it looks kind of like the skyline of you know, a city skyline, which is really cool. It is a power filler, which I will not demonstrate because I actually inked both my pens. It has 23 karat palladium nib, and it's going to be an exclusive to us at Goulet, only 35 of each color. We're going to have red, green, and then we're going to have a gray one too, which I don't have yet. So really pumped about that. We got those on the site, $576. Not exactly an impulse buy necessarily, but that's there for the taking. So we'll have those available for sale probably next week. Maybe, it all depends. I only have samples. I don't have the actual, all the pens in, otherwise I'd show you the gray. But we're still waiting on those, so be patient with me on that, and we'll have them coming soon. So that's pretty fun. Let's go ahead and get right into the questions, shall we? I got a lot of ink questions this week, I will say. And I don't know what happened, but Instagram just like blew up with questions. So I did a fun little video, little intro video asking for questions with me and my famous trench coat, my short trench coat that I used in the Shading Inks video, where I was wearing shorts, but it looked like I was not wearing anything under my trench coat, so it kind of looks like a flasher. But anyway, that trench coat is now famous around the Goulet office, so I wore that. Anyway, it was kind of fun, and it really worked. Got a ton of questions. Ended up getting like 76 questions this week, plus because I didn't record one from last week, I had like over 100 questions this week. So I am sorry, I am gonna not answer the majority of your questions, those of you who submitted. I'm saving a ton of them to maybe do in the future or something. I'm sorry, but it's just, for the sake of time, I have to pare it down. So for those of you select few, here we go, who I chose your question. Pen and writing questions. Let's start out with Ryan M. on Facebook. What is more important in a smooth fountain pen? The feed or the nib, or is it a bit of both? Double question mark. It honestly, it has to do with both, but it's mainly the nib. Okay, so yes, the feed is important, and that has to do more with the ink delivery, which definitely can have an impact, but I'm going to focus mainly on the nib. So the grind of the nib has a lot to do with it. That's the part, the tip. So that's the part that's actually touching the page. So the alignment, and then how much it's smooth and how properly it's ground and everything, that is going to affect it the most drastically, because that is the friction point where the tip is actually touching the paper. There are other factors as well. The paper itself, how rough it is, that affects it as well. But your question is more specifically about the pen, so I won't touch on that too much. Where the feed kind of comes in is if you are having a really dry flow of ink and you are having to press harder. Just the act of pressing harder on a pen is going to give you more friction and not make it feel as smooth. And also, if you're having to press too much and compensate, that can cause the nibs to flex out a little bit, the tines to flex out a little bit on your nib. It can cause misalignments, especially if you have the pen rotated one way or the other in your hand. That can cause it to be scratchy, especially on the cross stroke. So that's where the flow and the feed, where the delivery of the ink can really ultimately affect the way that your pen feels on the page. Of course, there's other factors too, like the weight of the pen and your writing speed and yada, yada, yada. But honestly, how well the nib is tuned is going to affect it more drastically than anything else. That's why having proper alignment is key, which if you watch my video on the Goulet loop tutorial, that will show you how to kind of check for alignment there. And then making sure that it is smoothed to your liking as well. Different companies, they tune them differently. Some of them are a little bit toothier, like Aurora is one. Others are really, really smooth, like Visconti. They make theirs really smooth. So a lot of it has to do with preference. I think most people tend to prefer them to be pretty smooth, but that's kind of what's going on there. And yeah, that pretty much covers what I wanted to say about that. Preston S. on Facebook asked, do you find that writing with a fountain pen necessitates a faster writing tempo versus other writing instruments? Or is this only true in cases of cheap paper or wet pens? Okay, Preston, I'm going to read into your question just a little bit and make an assumption here based on what you're asking, that you're probably using a fountain pen and you're using less expensive paper. Okay, maybe I'm not reading that much into the question since you say it's cheap paper, but no, I think what happens is most people, when they're switching over to fountain pens, it's their first pen, they're using the same paper they've always used, and they're using maybe a fountain pen nib size in medium because that's what is most widely available for whatever reason in the US. And especially if you go to like an office supply store or something, they just kind of generalize and they say, medium, that's what people want. So that's all they offer. And then you go and it's like, wow, this writing seems a lot broader than what I was used to with my gel pen or my ballpoint. And so you would compensate for that by writing faster, basically giving less time for the ink to kind of soak into the page as you're writing. That to me is not ideal. So really what you're getting at here is you are wanting a finer line than what your pen is actually providing with your pen, ink, and paper combination. So if that's the case, I would, writing tempo is one way to perhaps compensate for that, but it's really like the least ideal of all of the options you have in your little pen world to give you the exact kind of writing experience that you want. So yes, okay, it could be convenient because you're not changing anything else, but I would say if you could look to possibly change your nib size, that would be the easiest, maybe not easiest logistically, but that would be the longest lasting way to change that. Go to a finer nib, because honestly, if you're using absorbent paper, you're going to need a finer nib because most of the paper that we have in the US is not great. It's not made for fountain pens, so it's very absorbent. and it's just going to need a finer nib because that ink is going to really soak into the page, because fountain pen ink is more watery than ballpoint and gel rollerball ink. So I think that's more kind of getting at the heart of your questions. I think what you're saying is wet pens is probably just normal pens that you're using on more absorbent paper. If you change your paper, I think it would open up a whole new world. That's why people that really get into fountain pens end up, well, I shouldn't make an assumption. I would say it's more common for people to explore broader nib sizes when they get into changing their paper. I was going to say like more experienced people get into broader nib sizes. That's really not the case. It's really a preference thing. But I would say in general, where I was going with all that is I tend to recommend extra fine and fine nibs for people that are just getting into fountain pens, because you're probably using your normal paper and those nibs will more mimic what you're expecting based on the pens that you've been using up until that point. Does that make sense? I hope so. Kind of went a weird way on that question, but that's what I'm thinking. So I would not necessarily, no, I would not say that a faster writing tempo is necessary. I think you just need to get the right combination of paper and pen. And ink too. Ink affects it to a degree, less so than paper and nib size. All right, John A on Facebook says, which discontinued pen would you like to return? Also ink. Okay, so you threw the ink in there. I'm going to focus mainly on the pen because the ink, I'm going to show you my ink collection here in a second, and it's pretty ridiculous. Talking about the pens. So I want to give a disclaimer here. Fountain pens have been around for a very long time, and I am definitely not an authority on vintage pens. So that said, when you're talking about bringing something back, you're talking about non-modern pens, which are outside of my wheelhouse. So this is very much coming from a place of I'm perhaps more in like the amateur degree when it comes to vintage pens. I'm not as much an expert in that as I am in more of the modern pens. So that said, I have some of my personal favorites here. I didn't pick just one because I wanted to take the easy way out on this question, but I will ultimately give you one. I just want to show you the others first. So one of the ones that I think is the coolest from a technological standpoint, and I'm a very utilitarian guy, so I like the way things are built. And I'm going to slink down a little bit here in my chair. So this is the Schaefer Snorkel. And this is one that I picked up at a vintage show, the DC Pen Show. What's cool about this pen, if you've never seen it, and some of you probably have for sure because it's very popular, is when you twist the back, it has this little, I don't even know what you call it, this little feed tube that comes down here. And then then you twist it to fill inside. See? So it's got this little bladder inside, and you pump it to fill. Granted, you're doing this down in a bottle of ink. But then when you go to screw it back together, it retracts again so that you can write properly with the pen. So it's really a marvel of engineering to have this in there. It makes it so that you can fill from the bottom of your bottle so that you don't have to do all kinds of weird things in syringes and stuff like that. Very, very cool. Pretty expensive to manufacture and engineer. They did not make them for an incredibly long period of time. To repair them is kind of a pain, but I think it's very cool and I like it a lot. Another one is the Parker 51. Big fan of that one. It is a hooded nib. Parker 51 is arguably the most popular fountain pen ever sold. They sold millions of them. And it's a very popular pen. The weight is good, the balance is good, size is great for men and women. And it's just, it writes really nicely. So very kind of cool design. This one that I have here is the, little pump filler here. So that's kind of cool as well. And I don't know, just kind of neat. Very popular all-around pen. So it was around for a very long time and sold a lot of them, but also very cool. Also, I'll throw this one back as well. This did not sell a ton of these because we had production issues. This is the Monteverde Invincia Nighthawk. This was an exclusive Goulet one that we had. It's sentimental to me, of course. Those of you who've been around Goulet for several years, it was about 3 years ago that we had this pen. Gosh, can't believe it was that long ago at this point. But it's Monteverde, it's all black, all tricked out. It's a matte black carbon fiber, very minimal branding and accents. However, we were having issues with the finish on the carbon fiber. So had to discontinue it due to quality control issues, unfortunately. The last one I have is a recent acquisition of mine, which I've become somewhat infatuated with. This is the Pilot M90, which is a stainless steel pen. Very similar in kind of design and style to the Pilot E95S that you see today. Interesting pen, but it has an integrated nib. So the nib is actually part of the body of the pen. And just the lines on this pen are great. That feed, the swoop on that feed is just fantastic. I'm looking off screen at my monitor over here if you see me going that way. That's why it's that way. So I became infatuated with it. Originally it sold close to $200. I paid more than that because they're hard to find. I think it was available in the early 90s. But it's very sleek. I like it. Very kind of James Bond-esque, in my opinion. It's got a little blue jewel on the top. So really kind of cool. And honestly, when John Lane was here, I was like, John, can you bring this back? He was like, well, maybe. Let me see what I can do. So that is no guarantee whatsoever. However, that is the one that I would say I would bring back if I could, because I think there's a chance, at least a slight chance, that it could actually happen. So let's all rise up and ask Pilot to bring back the M90, because I think that would be really cool. So that's where I'll leave it. And then ink, I'm actually going to pass that question off until later when I do the collection of showing my ink when I do that. So there you go. All right, I got a bunch of ink questions. So let's start out with Natalie B on Facebook. Natalie says, how long do ink manufacturers keep making a particular ink? If you see an ink you like, should you buy it right away in case it's never made again? If you have a favorite ink, should you buy a lifetime supply? For example, the shimmertastic line and Iroshizuku line. Okay, so clearly I'm a retailer and I have a particular opinion about this, you know, and being that I've sold several inks that have disappeared forever, I have some insight into this, but what I do want to say just kind of right up front is I'm not trying to like get you to artificially buy more than you should. This is certainly something where you should use your own judgment. I never try to like overhype things. I really, really don't. Like I genuinely don't want to try to get you to buy things that you don't want or need. So just get that right out there. But that said, I will say it varies a lot. Most of the time when you're talking about new ink colors that are coming out from an existing company that makes ink to whatever degree, whether it's a pen company like Lamy that's releasing an ink with a special edition pen, or whether it's something like you know, Pelikan Edelstein that's doing their ink of the year. Usually they're pretty clear about when an ink is intended to have some kind of end date when they manufacture it. For example, the Pelikan ink of the year, clearly it's the ink of the year. It's not going to be around for 5 years. You know what I mean? Other inks like Shimmertastic and Iroshizuku, they add colors to the line, but they don't say how long they're going to be available or anything like that. We usually have some kind of good indicator of when something is limited in some capacity. In that case, when something is said to be limited to whatever degree, it's usually better to kind of get in there when you can and get it. We've had colors such as Lamy Copper Orange, which we got not that many bottles. I'm not sure I can say exactly how many bottles we got, but it was not a lot. And we got one shipment, and then I think we followed it up with one tiny little shipment after that, and it was gone, and that was it. And it was way less than we thought it would be. We thought it would be available for as long as the pen, like maybe available for a year or so, because we had previous colors like, you know, Neon Coral and stuff like that. I actually think Neon Coral might have come after that. No, Neon Coral, I can't remember now whether Neon Coral was before Copper Orange or not. It was. So we had Neon Coral, which didn't really sell at all, and then we bought Copper Orange and it all sold, and then we went to reorder and it was gone forever, and we were like, what the heck? It was like one shipment and that was it, and it was gone, and everybody was upset, and it's an amazing orange. That might be the one that I would choose to bring back, honestly, but there's that. So ones like that are really frustrating because they're intended to be somewhat limited, but we never know exactly how long. A lot of it has to do with demand. A lot of it has to do with a lot of different things. I think when they're making these batches of these limited inks and stuff like that, I don't really know how big they're making it. They are kind of guessing. The risk of it running out is much greater than it is, say, with a new, I don't know, Noodler's color that comes out, or with a new Pilot Iroshizuku, which they're not coming out with anymore. They amped up their colors for a couple of years there and then they stopped. So that maybe is a bad example. But like Diamond Shimmertastic when they came out, since you threw that one out there. They're adding those colors to the line, but it's not a limited edition. They're telling us like it's a regular part of the line. It's going to be available, and Diamond historically doesn't really discontinue much anyway. They're still hanging on to colors that we don't sell well at all, and we've actually dropped and stopped even caring about. So that is less likely the case with something like Shimmertastic or Iroshizuku or honestly JR Bond, like the 1670s. Like those are really hot, but they're a special thing that they have been making and continue to make. So I'm not anticipating they're going to stop making it anytime soon. So I'm going to be less inclined to say that you need to like rush in and get a new Shimmertastic when it comes out, unless you just really, really want it. But when there's something like the Dark Lilac, which I don't have my bottle here actually because our media team is using it right now. So, but that one we sold out like very quickly, I think within 2 hours of getting it. We are going to be getting a crud ton more of that, I can say. However, I don't know with that color, like I don't know if this is going to be like the last shipment and then that's it. So if you fall in love with a limited color, like Pelican Edelstein Tourmaline is one of Rachel's favorite colors of all time. Before that color ran out, she took like 3 bottles of it. You know what I mean? Because she knew she would want it for a while, and she knew it had an expiration date and it was going to be gone. So that's the kind of thing where you'll need to use your judgment. But I would say in general, you don't need to stock up like crazy on regularly offered inks. It's only the limited ones that you do. All right, Hobbles and Things from Instagram, which, by the way, Instagram is a new legit hotness as far as Q&A questions. So that's pretty cool. So thank you for everybody who asked questions on Instagram. It's quite a vibrant commenting community there. So that's really cool. You asked, is there an ink that is similar to the Lamy Dark Lilac? Nice flow with the questions here, right? Good segues. So Lamy Dark Lilac, I don't have my bottle right here because media team's using it right now, but I swabbed it up. It's a beautiful color. Nice dark purple. When you end up writing with it, it's more this dark purple. I did a Q-tip swab. I did a nice long swab so you could see like how much the color can vary based on the degree of saturation depending on your pen and nib combo and stuff like that. So it's a nice dark purple. It can have a tiny bit of sheen to it when you really dump it on there, but really, this is even a Q-tip swab, and we were able to get it on like some of our swabs, but it's not a Shimmertastic. It's not anything like that. So don't expect that. But it's a really, really solid, good-looking purple, like this purple. And the bottle's really functional too. So that's kind of neat. So there's a couple of colors that are similar to this, and I'll name a few of them. Diamond Bilberry is one that would be a good option as an alternative. Diatomentus Blackcurrant and Aubergine are both two colors that are pretty good. If you want something with some permanence to it, the Diatomentus Document Ink Violet is actually pretty close and gets that waterproofness that you might be looking for. And then Private Reserve Tanzanite actually is a really nice dark purple as well. Probably one of Private Reserve's best colors in my opinion. So those are all nice dark purple ones there, but we are expecting more at the end of May for Lamy Dark Lilac. So if there just is no substitute for you there, we are going to have that. But if you're watching this video like years in the future, it may already be gone. All right, this question is from J1448 on Instagram. Hi Brian, I know in the past you've made videos showing us your extensive pen collection. You've mentioned that your main reason for getting into fountain pens was to be able to experiment with different inks. I'm curious as to what your ink collection might look like and how you organize your ink. Well, I'm going to both wow you and disappoint you with this because while I have an impressive ink collection, it is not impressively organized, much like many aspects of my life because I'm not a super organized person. It takes concerted effort for me to organize things. However, I do have some ink bottles that I think you would be interested to see. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of those. Move my pens because I'm going to need to make some room. Actually, I'm going to slide back my computer here even, get that out of the way. So in terms of how I have my ink organized, the ink that I use like on a fairly regular basis is down here in this drawer. And I have 30 bottles of ink or so. And I'm realizing now it's going to take me a minute to get all these out. So I will maybe not get all of them out. Maybe if I can talk at the same time. So some of these I've got various Iroshizuku, Edelstein. I got Omos Purple there, which now is discontinued. I should probably move that into my discontinued set. Little bottles here and there that I'll end up using for various things. Got all kinds of Noodlers, 54th, black, which I use for Nibnook stuff. Blue, one of my favorites, Liberty's Elysium, of course. I've got various other ones like Bad Blue Heron, Apache Sunset, Purple Heart, some of the ones that I talk about here and there. Got some 1670, some Stormy Gray, Rouge Hematite, Diamond Wild Strawberry. Here come some of the Iroshizukus, a bunch of these. Many of you are probably drooling right now. This desk is getting out of control. Lexington Gray, Lamy Blue. A couple more diamonds. What I've got here? Marine, of course. Oxblood, Red Dragon, absolutely. Emerald of Chivor, of course. A couple of Viscontis, Visconti Blue, which I live, and Bordeaux. Oh, sorry, Burgundy, yeah. Waterman. Got Diplomat. Picked that up recently. Got a little Stephen Brown there. A little shout out to you, Stephen. Had a customer send that to me, actually. Diamond Blue Velvet, one of my favorites. Faber-Castell. A couple more. Aurora Black, Lamy Turquoise, and Hypnotic Turquoise. So that's kind of what I have just available at the ready in my drawer. And now I'm realizing I've filled up my desk completely. And it's going to get really unruly here in a minute, guys. So bear with me, and gals. So these are kind of the inks I have at the ready in my desk drawer. I think I have an ink problem, is what I'm realizing right now. I have some samples. Got a couple of bins of these samples here, but they're not as impressive as some of the other things I'm going to show, so I won't focus on too much. Most of the other things I have like old limited edition bottles of ink, which I have labeled and kind of stored away. So I have some oldies but goodies here. I got a bottle of the old school Noodler's Blue Upon the Plains of Abraham. Got some of the original shipment of J.R. Bond's 1670 Rouge Hematite. I have a Pelican Blue Black, which was discontinued in the US a number of years ago. Grabbed a bottle of that. I have a Gate City Everflow ink, which I carried for a hot minute. This was Richard Binder's ink that he came out with years ago. Got another Noodlers. This is Prime of the Commons. Got some old 41 Brown, some different like variations. I'll usually hang on to stuff. If there's like variations of things, like the reformulation of Noodler's Army Green, which if you remember way back when, I have that. So I'll usually try to hang on to like interesting things. What else have I got? I've got all of the Noodler's Russian and UK inks that we carried back in the day, like Kuperin, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Dostoevsky, Pasternak, Essenin, various Black Swan and Australian Roses versions that have come out over the years. What else have I got here? Miscellaneous bottled ink. Let's check this out. We're going to go on a journey together, folks. All right, let's see here. I have a partial bottle of the old Parker Penman Sapphire, which you're probably drooling about if you like that. I have some Scribble Workshop inks, one of each of their original colors. That was a brand that is no longer made that we used to carry. I have all of those. I also have one of each of the old Caran d'Ache Colors of the Earth inks in the old 30 ml bottles, which are really cool, and I'm sad that they're gone, but I snuck one of those. I also have one of each of the colors of the Sailor Gentle line that used to be out. So like Sky High and, you know, like Blue Black and the Nanos and stuff. And then I've got gosh, I'm rusty on the names of them now because they don't actually say them on the box, but I've got all those original colors back when we used to be Sailor, retailers. So those are really kind of fun and interesting. Some old discontinued stuff. That's what all these bins are, is like old stuff. Then some things that I don't, so like older stuff. I got a couple of things like products we don't carry, like I got a Mont Blanc Midnight Blue and Red Chalk, some special stuff there. I've got some old like Private Reserve Invincible Blue and Invincible Black from back in the day. Tangerine Dream. I have some like samples of certain colors. So like the Tangerine Dream Hot Bubblegum and Candy Apple Red, those were special test inks that they sent us that they never actually rolled out. But we tested them and I kept them at an Organic Studio set here, which is kind of interesting, that I hung on to before we stopped carrying them. And then I got a Mont Blanc Dandy Turquoise. An old bottle. This right here is Diamond China Blue in the old gold box. This is perhaps the most special of all. This was the first bottle of ink that I ever purchased and ever used. So, very important bottle to me right there. I have this here. This is a bottle that's a sample. If you remember from back in the day, Liberty's Elysium, if you look back when we first came out with it, it was, you know, questioned as to the legitimacy of its bulletproofness. So I had Nathan reformulate a more bulletproof version of it. This one bottle is the reformulated version, which essentially writes close to the Noodler's Upper Ganges Blue. But that's kind of what it ends up looking like. But that's that bottle right there. Never been available for sale. Got an original bottle with no glitter in it, the Jeroboam Blue Ocean. I have some old bottles of Omos Blue back when it was really, really dark blue. I have a bottle of, this is the Rower and Klingner special edition they came out with, the Blue Black, which is numbered. And this is actually numbered 0 out of 1,000. So that was kind of cool with a special flip top box. That was really hot. They came out with for like 10 minutes back a while ago. I have a couple other bottles of 1670, just like in the packaging because I'm a hoarder. I have my bottle of Pilot Blue, which is Namiki Blue. But this is the bottle that comes in the custom 823 packaging. Just a bottle of Pelican Royal Blue. It's nothing too special. This is funny. So I had some bottles of Boeing Sky Blue and Porsche. I don't even know the color of that. These were test bottles that we never had for sale, and Coca-Cola as well. I'm not sure if these trademarks were officially like nailed down, so at least in the US. So because we buy these from Diatramentis over in Germany, I'm not sure that we have the rights to be able to use these. So we never sold them, but we got samples of them. So this Sky Blue is scented to smell like jet fuel. This one is scented to smell like gasoline, and this Coca-Cola is scented to smell like Coca-Cola. So kind of fun and interesting there, but kind of special one-offs. Got some other Noodlers hanging, some other just, you know, various packages of samples and whatnot. And then I have one more box. Bear with me. I'm like really running out of room here. You know, I haven't really pulled all of it out at one time like this. So this is actually kind of fun for me. So I'm doing that for myself as much as anybody. I got a Mont Blanc Tolstoy. I have some of the Ink of the Year Edelsteins. Got tourmaline, amber, and amethyst here. I've got some Lamy limited stuff, the neon with the cartridges, the orange, of course. Yes, I have 2 bottles of that. I have a bottle of Ackerman. Which one is it? The purple, I forget what it is. Vulpen inked. Oh no, Wuhrt Violet. It's okay. I have one of every Levenger ink because I don't get asked about them much these days, but I used to get asked them about a ton. So I bought one of each just so I could have a point of reference there. And then I have a box of the Diamine Flower set, the entire set. So that's kind of cool. Let me, whoops. If I open that up, we haven't sold them individually. They've only been in sets. So yeah, still got it in the original packaging and everything. So usually when there's special edition inks and stuff that come out, my team knows that I'm a hoarder and I want to have all of the things. So they know to set aside for me, and that way I can hang on to it and pull it out for cool videos like this, right? Because that is the reason why I need to have it, not because I have a problem. And then what is this? This is also another, the music set, Diamine music set as well. So both limited Diamine sets they've had there. Wow, I am realizing I have an ink problem right now, folks. So thanks for pointing that out and getting it on video that I have a true problem with all my inks. It's not really a problem, I guess, unless it's causing me issues. Maybe Rachel will look at this and be like, wow, Brian, you seriously got to get this under control. But you know, it's okay. When you're a pen fanatic, you somehow justify all these things in your mind, right? I'm not gonna see if I can leave these here if that's cool, because I don't want to spend the next 20 minutes putting all these away, at least while the video is still going. So I'm just gonna go ahead and scroll on through, and we will make a little room for my laptop here, and you'll just get to stare at all these inks while I continue to talk. Thanks for hanging in there. All right. Chris V on Facebook says, hey Brian, I'm currently in the pursuit for the best light aqua teal blue ink. I am currently using the Waterman inspired blue, and I would like to know what is the best ink that will pop out of the page in that color range. I also value dry time, so there's a trade-off between is there a trade-off between how much an ink pops out versus how quickly it dries? So kind of two different questions here. I'll address them both. I really honestly wanted this question as much for the second part as anything. Just in general, when you're asking me questions, the broader that I can make the topic, the more wiggle room that gives me in terms of answering it. I've answered 1,500 or so questions at this point, so it's really helpful for me to have some room to cover the topics. So, to answer the first part of your question, you're asking for teal aqua inks. Personally, my favorite in that range is Diamine Marine. It's a little more on the green side than your Inspired Blue. Inspired Blue is a great color though. I think that's a really good trade-off between a color that pops and a color that dries in a pretty decent time. It's not a fast drying ink by any means, but there's always going to be a trade-off between a pop of color and dry time. Mainly because, and now I'm getting to your second question, mainly because there's a relationship between the dye and how quickly it dries. So when you have an ink, it's made of several different components, but two of the main components are dye and water, right? Mostly water, some dye, because dye is very concentrated, and dye is very dry in terms of how it flows. So when you have a lot of dye, it's going to make it pop more, but it's also going to write drier. So when companies are using a lot of dye for a very saturated color, they also add lubricants to it, which, fun little fact, is part of why there's more nib creep with really saturated colors. Anyway, it's because of the lubricant. The lubricant also takes longer to dry. So when you have a color that's very saturated, it's not necessarily the dye itself that's taking a longer time to dry. I'm not 100% sure scientifically if that's the case, but that's kind of what you're dealing with, is a longer dry time with more saturated inks. Really, that's all you need to worry about. Very saturated color, longer dry time, typically, is what you're going to find. So that's what I would say, is if you are looking for a very saturated color, expect a longer dry time. So I have a couple other recommendations based on the more of the blue that's in the vein of the Inspired Blue like you have. Noodler's Navajo Turquoise is a really, really good color. Pops a lot, great shading. A little bit slightly longer dry time because it's a little more saturated color. But Private Reserve Tropical Blue also is a nice blue. And Lamy Turquoise actually is pretty decent. That one is going to have a little quicker dry time, so not quite as saturated, still pops a lot, and has really good shading too. So those would be my recommendations for you, Chris. All right, lastly, I've got some troubleshooting questions. jr.pancake on Instagram says, I'm having difficulty with the jr.pancake supple wickless sealing wax sticking to my seal. I have tried moistening the seal with breath, even dipping it in water, but the wax still wants to stick to the seal. Do you have any other ideas I can try to get a reliable, clean release from the seal? Yes, so let me explain a little bit what's going on, maybe why this is happening. Most seals, not all of them, are going to be made of brass or some other kind of metal. Brass works really well, but the downfall that you have with really any kind of metal, but especially brass, is that it's going to heat up, especially if you're doing more than one seal in a row. But if you're, it's hard to say based on your technique, but when I do a seal, I use a torch, so a handheld torch, to try to get it really hot. Do I have my torch here? It's at home. Darn it, because I was using seals at home. I don't have it here. But I use a handheld torch, like a handheld camping butane torch. That works really well. They're like $6 at Home Depot. Really good investment if you're going to be doing any significant degree of sealing wax. This is my own handle, by the way. I made this, just in case you're wondering, like, where did I get that handle? I made it. So you can get the wood from the Holy Land, and you can turn it yourself if you want one, because I don't have time. But anyway, the seal is really cool. So when you are going to do the seal, what I like to do is I like to heat it up, pour the wax on, and then I don't leave it in there for long. Once you get the initial seal, you can pretty much pull it back out. If you're leaving it in there for more than like a couple of seconds, that hot wax is heating up the brass on your seal. And that's when you run into problems. So if you have a hot seal, it's going to stick to it more. The wax is going to stick more. So I find that the best trick to get a clean, crisp seal is to take an ice pack, like, you know, the kind of ice pack you would grab out of the fridge, especially if you have one of those like gel type ice packs that you can really like get good contact on the seal. But, you know, the ones that are like hard plastic ice packs don't work quite as well, but even still, if you leave it on there for a while, it'll get it cold after a while. So just leave this on an ice pack for like 5-10 minutes before you're going to do your wax sealing. It's kind of annoying if you're only doing one wax seal, but if you're going to, especially if you're going to do a series, leave it on there, get it nice and cool, do your seal, and you'll notice a huge difference in the crispness of it. Especially if you're doing multiple seals in a row, putting it on the ice pack is going to be key, because when you're doing one seal after another, by like the third, fourth, fifth seal, that wax is going to start to stick to it like crazy, because that seal is going to get hot. So having it cool in the first place, but then putting it back on the ice pack in between when you're doing your seals and prepping and stuff like that is going to help tremendously to give you the best seals possible. Cool. Last question for this week from spydhole on Instagram. How do I stop a nib from singing? And actually I had somebody else that kind of jumped in and wanted this question answered as well, that asked a lot more stuff to it, but I like the simplicity of this question. So, well, spydhole, singing of a nib. So for those of you that don't know, if you have a nib that is singing, some people call it squeaking, but basically what's happening is you're writing, okay, and it's making some kind of audible hum or squeak or, you know, chirp or something like that as you're writing. Now, it's not going to be like one continuous, you know, kind of thing. It's usually going to be quick because your strokes are usually fairly quick. What's happening is you have, for whatever reason, one of the tines of your nib is actually vibrating at the exact resonant frequency of the nib itself, and it's causing an audible sound to come out. Not unlike a bowstring when you're playing a violin or a cello or something like that. Same kind of concept. It's vibrating because of the friction between the paper and the nib. It's vibrating in such a way that it's making an audible noise. Sometimes, if it's really severe, it can be so extreme that it actually atomizes the ink and causes the ink to spray out and either leave a fatter line than it should or actually like spat out onto the paper. Those are pretty extreme cases. That is something I think you see more commonly with like vintage pens and stuff like that. I have never come across that, but I've read about it. I've never come across that with new pens. So why is that happening? There's a lot of different reasons. That's kind of the cause ultimately. It's kind of a combination of the nib design itself, the length of the nib and stuff like that. That's a factor. Your writing speed and list and all that, and the not list. That notification just came up that said the word list on it, and I said it. Your writing, and it has to do a lot with the way the nib is tuned itself. No pun intended with the singing tune. I'll take credit for the pun though. I'll say it's intended because it's kind of clever. But there's a couple different reasons. It could be that the nib tines are spread apart a little bit. It could be that they're a little too close together. And usually if they're too close together, you're going to get more of a clicking than a singing. If you're getting a clicking, that means your nib tines are so close that they're actually like kind of hitting each other as you're writing. That's kind of a different thing than what I'm talking about. So that tends to sometimes get associated with it, but it has more to do with it when the tines are spread apart because the individual tines are operating independently in that way. But it will usually be in like a certain direction. You'll get a squeak or a noise in that one direction. And that's because that one tine often is ground in such a way that it is causing that friction to happen. So what happens when they make these nibs, they have the nib itself, and when the nib is initially made and stamped and all that, there's no slit in the tines. It's just, they do the tipping first. Well, they usually stamp it out, form the shape, they put the tipping on there, and then what they do is they cut the slit. And they do that, there's a couple different ways to do it, but usually it's like a very small cutting wheel, and it will spin, and they'll put the nib right in there. And in fact, a fun little fact here, the reason why there's a breather hole on the top of most nibs often is just that gives them a consistent place to stop when they are cutting the nibs. when they're cutting the slit in the nibs. That's really about the only reason. It doesn't drastically affect the performance of the nib. It's more of an aesthetic thing, and it gives them a firm place to stop. So that's a fun little fact for you. That's why some nibs, like Lamy nibs, they don't have the breather hole in the top, and you're like, what's going on? How do they still write? It's because it doesn't really affect anything. So anyway, that was a fun little fact, little Easter egg for you. But anyway, what happens is they're cutting it, and it's a very kind of a rough cut when they do that. So then it needs to be kind of tuned and stuff like that. And every now and then, they might not just get it all. So it's a kind of a rough cut when they do that initial cut, and especially if there's any leftover kind of on the tines, on the tip, if they don't polish that off all the way, you could get just one little piece of something that's hanging off of that nib that just so happens to hit when you're writing and your speed and your pressure and your angle and stuff like that, that it gets that squeak. So they usually are able to get that kind of thing out of there when they do the tuning and stuff, but every now and then something will slip through perhaps, or it's just the way, it's a pen that's a vintage pen that's been used for years by somebody that holds a pen a very different way. It was never an issue. And then you go to hold it your way and all of a sudden it's singing. It happens. Some people actually don't mind it and like it and they celebrate it as something, but for other people, they don't like it. It's usually something you can get rid of because of the way that it can come about and the different aspects to it that could be. It's usually better to leave it to a professional if it's something that really bothers you or affects the writing, especially if it's like spattering and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, what's probably going to happen is it's going to be just a matter of smoothing the nib with a micro mesh or a Mylar or something like that. If it's a new pen that you've got and it's having that issue, I would say exchange it, return it, do whatever, because it's probably not something you want to mess with if it's a brand new pen that you just bought, unless it's you like tinkering and it's not something that's that big a deal to you. But if you try smoothing and tuning and stuff like that, you're voiding the warranty of the pen, basically. So you want to get it taken care of. The retailer, I know we would exchange it here, whatever, if that's happening. If it's an older pen and something you don't mind messing around with yourself, it's not like you are incapable. So oftentimes, if you're going in a certain direction, whatever the direction you're going in, let's say it's always singing when you're going to the left, okay? So like I'm going from my right to my left. If that's the case, then it's going to be the right tine, usually that's happening, because that's the one that's kind of dragging as I'm writing on that cross stroke. If that's the case, then I know that that's the tine that's usually happening. So what I would do is I would actually take and bend the tine up a little bit, the opposite one, leaving the right tine to be lower. And then I would take a little bit of micro mesh or Mylar, depending on how severe it is. Mylar is finer than micro mesh, so Mylar might be a little safer to try. And I would just kind of take and just nick a little bit of that inside part of that nib and just kind of hit that a little bit, and then try it again and see if that does it. Sometimes that's all it takes. It literally could be that simple of just like, and then you write with it and it's beautiful. Other times it might be more severe. I would say if it's anything more severe than just a couple little quick things with a micro mesh or Mylar, then you probably shouldn't mess with it too much, because you might do more harm than good if you don't know what you're doing. Even that kind of thing, like I've messed around with it a little bit and know the general principles, but I'm not like a nib tuner, right? So I don't know how to fix it when it gets beyond that point. So that's when you would want to get it perfected by a pro. Cool? Awesome. All right, guys. I think that's going to be it for this week. My question of the week for this week is going to be, which discontinued pen would you like to see brought back if it was something that could be made available today? And of course, we'd want to have like, the one super special limited edition thing, whatever. But I don't know, be whatever. Just don't worry about price and all that kind of stuff. I would say if there's one thing that was like somewhat practical that you would want to see resurrected today, what would that be? And I think that'd be kind of interesting to hear. So I am going to shut down the video and clean up my desk because it's now 4:53 and I have to go get my kids. But I really want to thank you for watching this Q&A. Be sure to subscribe to YouTube if you haven't already, because we're doing some cool stuff on there these days. And we're doing cool stuff on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere, and our media team's killing it, and we're doing all kinds of fun stuff. The rest of our team is doing a really good job. Things are really humming along at Goulet right now, so it's some good stuff that you can follow us about. Yeah, be sure to submit your questions. I really enjoy having a lot of questions to pull from. I feel like it gives me a good, solid Q&A stuff to work on. And thank you just for supporting me every single week. It's really fun. I enjoy doing this. It is a good use of my time, and I really have fun. Thank you so much, and right on.